So Valentine's Day is just around the corner and I've got some great chocolate or cacao fragrances to recommend for you today. These are chocolate bombs or cacao bombs, and they utilize the notes of either chocolate or cacao to create a very chocolatey, delicious gourmand fragrance. So I've got 13 fragrances here for you today. You're going to find out what they are coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yeah, today we're talking about chocolate fragrances. Are you a fan of chocolate or cacao in fragrances? Do you enjoy gourmand fragrances? And do you wear chocolate or gourmand fragrances throughout the year? Do you kind of increase the wearing of the chocolate and the cacao fragrances when it gets close to Valentine's Day? Let me know, put some comments down so I can find out. You know, there's a lot of different varieties of gourmand fragrances, but chocolate seems to be a bit more challenging for me, but these are definitely approved by me. I have left off Chocolate Greedy from Montal. I don't care for it. I tried to really get into it, and there was a time I was really enjoying it. I've kind of fallen out of love with it again. So we're going to go ahead and get started with one fragrance from a smaller house that's fairly new. This is BRUNO PERRUCCI Mood Parfums ALIAS EXTRAIT, this one right here. So this is a very complex chocolate cacao fragrance. It's very chocolatey, but lots of other stuff happening here. We for sure have loads of cacao here to give you that chocolatey effect in a fragrance, but there's also tobacco here, so it has a bit of a burned ashiness in here. There's woods in here for sure, loads of it as it's drying down, and it also gets a bit ambery when it's drying down, but they've also thrown in rum, licorice, vanilla, saffron, musk, and birch. So I do get little animalic touches here, so if you're put off by animalics, I think this one might be one for you to stay away from. But if you enjoy a little bit of animalics thrown in with this overdose of gourmand touches from the cacao note, then definitely try ALIAS EXTRAIT from BRUNO PERRUCCI Mood Parfums. It's really delicious. It's an Italian house, very new, and it's a great fragrance, very long lasting. So moving on to number 2, we've got a fragrance from an Argentinian house who has now moved to, based out of Milan, Italy, the house of FUEGUIA. This is MUSKARA Cacao. So I actually have gone to their store in Milan several times, and not this last trip, but the previous time in September, I was in Milan briefly, and I stopped in once again and I smelled every single fragrance in that store, and I walked out with MUSKARA Cacao. This to me is like an overdose of powdery cacao in a chocolatey form, and it's so intoxicatingly delicious. It's almost like you've got the most expensive cacao that you've bought from like a very high-end, you know, chocolate store or some kind of a food store, not your like over-the-counter, not department store, but like grocery store cacao. But this is very high-end, very luxurious cacao, very expensive. You can smell the richness, and you're making a hot chocolate with it. It is to die for delicious. It smells so intoxicating. It's almost like you're walking into a store where all they do is make things with chocolate or cacao. That's what this smells like. It's beautiful. It's so good. I'm like touched by the way this fragrance, you know, interacts with me, because for me it just totally puts me into the place of where chocolate is being maybe produced or being worked with, because the authentic smell of the chocolate here is magical, and I'm obsessed with the smell. It's really delicious. It's MUSKARA Cacao from FUEGUIA. Moving on to the house of AKRO, this is dark. I've spoken quite a bit about this one, and this is dark, right? Yeah, it's dark. For me, it's a cocoa and dark chocolate combo with some light spices. There's warm spices here of cinnamon. There's hazelnuts also, because definitely there's a nuttiness thrown in there, and of course some sweet vanilla syrupiness in there as well to create for a yummy gourmand you know, experience here. Really delicious fragrance. It might be a bit simplistic. It's not as thick as like this one, or even the BRUNO PERRUCCI Mood Parfums ALIAS, but still smells really yummy. This is AKRO Dark. Next, going to the house of XERJOFF, this is SYMPHONIUM, this one right here. So now, if you've ever seen those chocolates that are shaped like oranges, and you peel them and there's these like little rinds of them. That's what this one smells like, XERJOFF SYMPHONIUM. It's a combination of oranges and chocolate. And there was a time I used to order mochas with an orange syrup in it, you know, like a coffee, but it was very, very chocolatey, and cacao, and then they throw in that orange syrup. So you have this kind of like a very unique taste in there, and that's what kind of this reminds me of. It's orange juice, Mandarin orange, Belgian chocolate, vanilla, cardamom, and there's a couple of different kinds of oud here, but for me the oud is not very prominent, so this is not about oud, it's more about the gourmand. And I feel like the oud's in here to give it a backbone, to, you know, extend the life of the fragrance, because we're dealing with kind of very fragile notes, especially gourmand notes and things like that. But a very delicious fragrance. It's XERJOFF SYMPHONIUM for a very orangey, chocolatey, milk chocolatey, you know, dessert-like fragrance. So moving on to Gallagher fragrances, for one of the best gourmand fragrances from this house, this is Wicked Good, this one right here. And very, very delicious, guys. Really, really delicious. And we're not doing a lot of different things here with this particular fragrance, although kind of sort of is in the ballpark of this one from FUEGUIA, MUSKARA Cacao. But for me, Wicked Good has some more things happening with it, whereas MUSKARA Cacao is very in-your-face cacao, like it's basically alive. That cacao is like alive and you're smelling how great it smells. Here we've got Tonka beans, so it has some bitterness, it has some almondy touches, and of course there's vanilla in here as well to give it kind of a sweet, syrupy, vanillic sugariness. But a really, really delicious gourmand here from Gallagher Fragrances. It's definitely a chocolate bomb, and if you love the idea of chocolate and fragrances, definitely try this one. This is Wicked Good from the house of Gallagher Fragrances. Moving on to the house of PROFUMUM ROMA. This is SORRISO, this one right here. And once again, we've got a really yummy, delicious, delicious chocolate. Very, very delicious. Really love the fragrances from PROFUMUM ROMA. And I feel like, for me, PROFUMUM ROMA as a house really does gourmands perfectly. And what I like about PROFUMUM ROMA fragrances, they're not broken down into top notes, heart notes, and base notes. So these are the kind of fragrances you can rub on. Plus they're oily. And this is something you could do and just rub it on, and you're not going to lose the top notes or the heart notes and things like that, because when you do that with a regular fragrance, when they're broken down into top, heart, and base notes, when you rub it, you're going to kind of like burn away the top notes. But here, since they're on the same layer, and you're not going to, you know, burn away the top notes because there's really not here. But it's a yummy combination of vanilla with dark chocolate. It's really, really thick and gooey chocolate. It's dark, but there's definitely some light almondy powderiness here. I feel like there is a bit of heliotrope, but in addition to those notes that I just mentioned, you've got some woods in the dry down, if there is any kind of a dry down here, but there's also orange in the note as well. So you got a little bit of that combination of notes here with Symphonium, but for me, I feel like they're equally balanced there. Here with the SORRISO, you've got a lot more chocolate. It's an overdose of chocolate, and it definitely feels and wears like dark chocolate with an undertone of orange. This PROFUMUM ROMA is so delicious. All of these are really great chocolate fragrances. Really, really love them, and that's why I'm recommending them. And I'm not recommending, chocolate greedy from the House of Montal. It just doesn't smell great to me. Moving on to the House of Strangelove. This is Melt My Heart. So this is a different take on a chocolate fragrance, and even though it features lots of dark chocolate, they've got a lot of Orris here, so it's a very powdery, irisy take on a chocolate fragrance, a dark chocolate fragrance. But they've also thrown in Ylang-Ylang in here, and there's oud, and again, the oud is there to kind of like enhance the fragrance and kind of like give it a backbone. But when you compare them to something like this fragrance Symphonium from XERJOFF, the oud definitely in Melt My Heart is a lot more prominent. You'll definitely notice a bit more animalics in here with the oud, but definitely very powdery and very dark chocolatey. And for me also, there's a bit of a presence of something like makeup in here. Perhaps it's the Ylang-Ylang note or the Orris note in here. Could be also that there's violet thrown in here as well. But it's really delicious. It's Melt My Heart from Strangelove. Do you guys know that one? Do let me know. But moving on to the House of Unique Luxury. This is Chocolate Makes Me Happy. You guys familiar with this one? Does chocolate make you happy? Let me know, put a comment down. For me, this is cacao and dark chocolate and loads of it. but they've added this lavender note in here to give it a bit of a mass smell to the fragrance. But in the end, it's gourmand with aromatic touches. There's labdanum here for very ambery touches, and then there's also caramel, ginger, benzoin, and cinnamon. So it's warm spices, some fresh spices, some zing, and some ambery touches as well. But of course, the caramel throws in a bit of a vanillic experience in the fragrance to give it a kind of gooey consistency. So chocolate makes me happy from the house of Unique Luxury. That's the 8th fragrance for you today, and this is not a ranked list, by the way. So up next, going to the house of Histoire de Parfums. This is 1969. So 1969, for the longest time, I thought was all about patchouli, but then I said to myself, well, Histoire de Parfums already has a fragrance called Noir Patchouli. Do they have another one? When I first smelled this one, I thought, this is not patchouli, although there is patchouli in the mix, but this is all chocolate. It's dark chocolate and a fruity peach note, so it's got like a chocolatey, fruity dessert vibe here with some spices of cardamom. There's of course the patchouli, a bit of rose comes in, and some spices of cloves, warm spices, and then of course coffee comes in. So this is a yummy, sweet, gourmand fragrance utilizing the dark chocolate note with the spices and the peaches. I don't know what it has to do with 1969. I didn't really figure it out, but it's quite yummy and delicious. If you like the idea of dark chocolate with some fruitiness, definitely check this one out. It's 1969 from the house of Histoire de Parfum. Then moving on to the house of BRUNO Acampora, or Acampora Profumi. This is Ruby. Ruby is an interesting dark chocolate fragrance, but quite the most delicious dark chocolate fragrance. For me, this one also has red berries, so to give it a bit of light fruitiness. And then they've thrown in some rose in here, and also musk with pink pepper. So it's a bit spicy and also powdery for sure. And I feel like the musk contributes to make the fragrance a bit powdery. But in the end, it's almost like this block of dark chocolate, but decadent, very, very high-end, really, really delicious, really yummy and expensive. And that's what you're wearing here, with light fruity undertones and a bit of rosiness. So this is Acampora's Ruby for a delicious fragrance. Moving on to the house of Dear Diary. Do you know this house? This is Two Senses Combined in One. So Two Senses Combined in One is very, very concentrated and a very ambery take on chocolate with dried fruits. So Dear Diary is a sister house of Maître Parfumeur Gantier, and this is definitely their gourmand amber fragrance, really intense with the dark chocolate, and there's dried fruits in here, so you've got like a bit of a plumminess and a bit of apricot-y touch, and so you get that combined with the dark chocolate. And then you've got benzoin, patchouli, amber, vanilla, heliotrope, and honey. So it's sweet, it's powdery, a bit almondy, and of course very, very ambery. And again, if you like the idea of something like Maître Parfumeur Gantier's Ambre Perso, but with like a chocolatey edge and a dried fruity edge, definitely check out Dear Diary's Two Senses Combined in One. Really yummy and very, very long lasting, of course. So we've got a couple more fragrances left. The next fragrance we're going to talk about is Maison Tahiti's Cacao Libertine. If you haven't caught my video I recently did for the Maison Tahiti Cacao fragrances over on Sunday, please go catch it. There is a USA giveaway of 14 samples from this house and all the fragrances in their collection. So there's 5 cacao, there's 5 vanilla, and 4 coffee fragrances. One lucky subscriber will win all 14 samples, and it's a great way to discover this line. And my favorite cacao in the collection is Cacao Libertine. It's not necessarily the most gourmand fragrance, but what I really like about it is the combination of cocoa and patchouli to give you kind of a chocolatey, creamy, kind of earthy, sparkling edge to the fragrance. Really a delicious fragrance here, really, really yummy. So it's got cocoa, patchouli, caramel, cardamom, vanilla, benzoin, rose, bergamot, mandarin orange. For a yummy combination, really earthy, you know, patchouli with that cocoa note. It's a bit powdery, and the caramel gives it the kind of creaminess along with the vanilla. So there's a bit of a gooiness running throughout it. The rose thrown in a very unique twist. Really yummy, really sexy twist in there, and this has turned out to be my favorite in the entire line. So it's Libertine, but it's actually, what I should say is it's Cacao Libertine from the house of Maison Tahiti for a yummy chocolatey experience. And then the last fragrance we're going to talk about is from the house of Mind Games. This is Double Attack. And this is a fairly new fragrance from Mind Games, although Mind Games is a fairly new brand, and this was one of my favorite fragrances in the collection. What I like about it is the dark chocolate. And the dark chocolate, once again, in here is not necessarily uber gourmand, but very chocolatey. For sure, there's an overdose of chocolate here. There's cinnamon with bitter orange. There's agave for a bit sweetness, along with the vanilla to throw in a kind of a gooey syrupy touch. And then they've thrown in some spices and aromatics, pink pepper, pimento, geranium, and it settles to a sandalwood. Really, really yummy, but if you're thinking this is uber gourmand, it's definitely not, but really delicious with the dark chocolate here and the cinnamon. So this is Mind Games and Double Attack. I should also reiterate, when I did my video on Maison Tahiti, they had a fragrance that was called Cacao to the number 2, or Cacao, that also had dark chocolate, or it was actually cacao with cinnamon. I didn't feature that one. It's not turned out to be my favorite because the cinnamon overpowered the chocolate in that, or the cacao in that. Here, I feel like the cinnamon is really supporting the dark chocolate, and I enjoyed here a lot more than I did in that fragrance. Anyway, those are the chocolate bombs or cacao bomb fragrances for you today. Let me know what your thoughts are on these fragrances. Have you tried them? Are you curious to try them? And is there another cacao or chocolate bomb that you would recommend? Put a comment down below so I can find out. But either way, guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye. So if you caught my recent video on upcoming fragrances, in the bonus section of that video I discussed some fragrances from Dame Perfumery. So I don't know what's going on with the brand, and I feel like the brand's changing names for their fragrances, but I wanted to highlight this fragrance called Chocolate Man from the house of Dame Perfumery. I believe it is being renamed to Chocolate Plus. I'm not 100% sure, but I wanted to recommend this one as a great chocolate fragrance, kind of on the inexpensive side. But for me, it's a very milky, creamy chocolate fragrance, and it's really delicious to wear. And if you're looking for something less expensive, for sure, this is one for you to try. And again, I'm not 100% sure what's going on. Is the name changing from Chocolate Man to Chocolate Plus? I'll have to do a little research, but for now, I think it's still selling out there. I'll have a link in the info box, you can find out. But Chocolate Man will be a great, you know, chocolate bomb or chocolate cacao fragrance to wear if you're into the idea of chocolate fragrances. Anyway, thanks so much for watching today. Have a good one. Bye-bye.